In this video, we'll create a new Angular project which has routing enabled in it. Now, what do I mean by routing enabled? Routing is one of the sub-libraries of Angular. You can choose to use it or you can choose not to use it. If you don't use routing, the functionality of the framework doesn't get included in your build. So it kind of saves some space and the amount of code that you send to your users. So if you enable routing, the Angular CLI project will have those libraries included. And you also have some hooks to the framework in order to configure your routing. So in order to enable routing, you can actually pass in an argument to your Angular CLI when you're creating a new project, and you ask it to set up the routing bare bone configuration. So just like Angular CLI sets up your bare bones application with a simple component, you can also tell Angular CLI to set up a bare bones routing configuration, and it kind of sets a placeholder where you can fill in the rest of the stuff. So I'm going to create a new Angular project, ng new, and I'm going to call it routing. And I can pass in a flag like this. So what this will let Angular CLI do is enable routing because you've passed in the -- routing flag. I'm just going to say routing intro just to avoid confusion. The name of the project is routing intro, and the flag here -- routing is what tells Angular CLI to enable routing, to set some basic code and configuration in there to enable routing. So I'm going to hit enter, and now the Angular CLI is going to create that project for me. And once it's done, we will have it open in Visual Studio Code. Okay, now I have the routing intro project open here, and it looks very similar to the Angular CLI project that we've been seeing so far, except for a few minor changes. So I'm going to start with package.json. The change that you'll notice here is that we now have a dependency on Angular router. So this is the sub framework. Like I said, it's a portion of the framework that's not included by default, but you can choose to use it. And in this case, since I've asked Angular CLI to include routing, it's included this dependency for me. So this is how things help. When you don't have routing, you don't need this router to be included, and so this doesn't get npm installed into your project, and this doesn't get included in your build when you do send out an ng build and deploy something to your server. So this is something that is included right now because we have routing enabled. So this is the first change that you'll see in the project. The second change you'll see in the project is that Angular CLI provides some bare bones configuration. Well, it just provides a place for you to configure your routing. So if you open your app.module.ts, now we see here there is a new module that it has included. It has included this thing called app routing module, and it has actually created that module here, app-routing.module.ts. See, app routing module is imported from app-routing.module. So if you open this, here you see it's created this class called app routing module, and it has created some configuration. It has this constant called routes, which is an empty array, and then it has this import of router module.forRoot. Okay, this sounds a little bit complex, but let's break this down step by step. So first of all is this array called routes, which is of type routes here. Now what is this? Routes is basically an array of this route class. So this is a convenience thing that you can actually just replace with this. It's basically just an array, all right? So instead of importing routes, you can just import route and declare an array of routes. What does this array of routes do? This array of routes is what configures your routes. Do you remember in the last video I told you that in order to configure routes, you need to specify a bunch of things. First, your URL, what is the route URL, and then map it to a component. Like, what is a component that needs to load when that route URL is accessed, right? And you configure that and you pass that to Angular, and then Angular does the rest, right? This is what we've learned. We basically need to have a bunch of mappings of URLs to components. Once you've established those bunch of mappings, you pass that mapping, that list of mapping, to Angular. So this is exactly what we're doing here. We specify the mapping here by an array of routes, and then you pass that configuration to Angular by calling this router module.forRoot of routes. Okay, once you do this, you're basically telling Angular to configure those routes. And whenever those routes are accessed in your page, Angular is going to load those components, right? So this array is going to be an array of objects, okay? An array of objects where each object specifies a mapping of a URL to a component. So if you do control space, you can see what are the things that you can choose here. So the first one is the path. The path is what specifies your URL, okay? So this can be u1 and then the component. The component is going to be whatever component you need to create, all right? So here, you're going to be doing a bunch of these. You're going to be having a bunch of these attributes, these objects rather. So view2 is going to go to component 2, view3 is going to go to component 3. So you specify this, and then this code is already in place by the Angular CLI is going to pass that configuration that you've specified here to Angular. And that's it. Routing is done. Everything is going to work fine. So let's test this out. We're going to create a simple app. It's not going to have a whole lot of routing functionalities. Let's just say we have 2 URLs. We have home and we have settings, right? You want to be able to access the app. /home should show the home component, a home view, and /settings to show the setting component, which shows the setting view.